Hello and welcome. Today, we're jumping right into a classic business mystery. It's a case that gives managers everywhere headaches, the project budget that's completely gone off the rails. Now, on the surface, it might just look like simple overspending, but the real culprit? Well, it's usually hiding in plain sight. Let's start digging. So, why does this happen? It's a story you've probably heard a million times, right? You plan a new project down to the last detail, but when the final report comes in, the costs are way higher than you budgeted for. It's not always about bad planning. It's often about a powerful, almost invisible force that's messing with your productivity. And today, we're going to put that force right under the microscope. So here's our game plan. First, we'll get familiar with our key investigative tool, the learning curve effect. Then we'll dive headfirst into the case of Citi International. We'll recalculate the standard hours, hunt down the real cost variances, and then, for the grand finale, we'll reconcile the budget and officially close the case. Okay, let's get started with our number one tool. You see, the absolute key to cracking this case is understanding something called the learning curve effect. It's a really fundamental idea in both costing and performance management. The logic here is actually super simple. The more you do something, the better and faster you get at it. Practice makes perfect. But the learning curve is more than just a saying. The really crucial part here, the part that turns this into a powerful business tool, is that phrase, predictable rate. This improvement isn't just random. We can actually measure it, and most importantly, we can budget for it. To make this real, just picture a new barista at your favorite coffee shop. That first fancy latte they make, it might take them a whole 5 minutes, fumbling with the machine, getting the foam just right. But you fast forward, and by the time they've made a dozen of them, their average time per drink has probably dropped like a rock. That right there is the learning curve in action. And it happens in every single industry, whether you're making coffee or building airplanes. And this brings us to the math that makes it all work. Okay, for your exams, you absolutely have to know this formula. Y equals A times X to the power of B. So what does it all mean? A is simply the time it takes to make the very first unit. X is just the total number of units you've made. And B, well, B is the learning index. It's calculated from the learning rate itself. It's the log of the learning rate divided by the log of 2. So for an 80% curve, B works out to be negative 0.322. This little formula is the key to our whole investigation. Okay, so with that theory under our belt, let's open the case file for our company, Citi International. They've just launched a new product, and the very first performance report has set off some major alarm bells. Take a look at this initial report. So they produced fewer units, right? 25 instead of the planned 30. So you'd think the costs in hours would be proportionally lower, but they're not. Something is off. The numbers just don't line up, and that is a huge red flag for management. This is the puzzle we need to piece together. And here's the big breakthrough in the case. A senior accountant dug in and realized the entire budget was built on a shaky foundation. They had assumed a pretty slow 90% learning rate, but in reality, the team was capable of a much more aggressive 80% learning rate. Big difference. They also thought the team would keep getting faster until Unit 20, but the learning actually leveled off or plateaued at Unit 15. So our mission is clear. We have to rebuild this budget using the correct information and see what the numbers should have looked like. Okay, time to roll up our sleeves and get into the numbers. The very first thing we need to do is calculate what the standard hours should have been for the 25 units they actually made, but using that correct 80% learning curve. We're going to break this down into 4 clear steps. First, we'll figure out the total time for those first 15 units, the period where all the learning's happening. Second, we need to find the exact time it took to make just the 15th unit, because that becomes our new study speed. Third, we'll calculate the time for the rest of the units, the next 10, at that new study speed. And finally, we just add it all up. Simple. All right, let's get into step 1. We're going to grab our formula for those first 15 units. Remember, A was 10 hours for that first unit, X is 15 for the 15 units, and B, our index for the 80% curve, is negative 0.322. Now, when you plug that in, the formula gives you an average time of about 4.18 hours per unit, but we need the total time. So we multiply that average by our 15 units. That gives us 62.72 hours for this initial learning phase. Okay, this next part is really, really important, so pay close attention. The learning stops at Unit 15. That means the time it takes to produce that one single unit becomes the new normal, the new steady speed. To figure out the time for just the 15th unit, we calculate the total time for 15 units, and then we subtract the total time it took for 14 units. The difference between them, 2.87 hours, is the time for that final learning unit. That's our new standard. So now calculating the time for the final 10 units is easy. 10 units times 2.87 hours each gives us 28.7 hours. And now we just put the two pieces together. We take the 62.72 hours from that initial learning phase, and we add the 28.7 hours from the steady production phase. And that gives us our new, correct, revised standard, 91.42 hours. This number right here is the key that's going to unlock this entire mystery. All right, we've nailed down the correct standard hours. Now we can finally switch gears and get into the financial side of things. Let's figure out exactly where the money went wrong by calculating the cost variances. First things first, we need our hourly labor rates. We'll go back to the original case file. To get the standard rate, we just divide the total budgeted cost by the budgeted hours. That gives us a standard of 660 rupees an hour. We do the exact same thing for the actual rate, divide the actual cost by the actual hours, and that comes out to 675 rupees per hour. So right away, we can see they paid their workers more per hour than they planned. Our first piece of evidence is the labor rate variance. This variance tells us one thing. Did we pay more or less per hour than we should have? Well, we can see they paid 15 rupees more per hour than the standard. So we multiply that 15 rupee difference by the 118.08 hours they actually worked. That gives us what we call an adverse or unfavorable variance of 1,771.20 rupees. Next up is the labor efficiency variance. This answers the question, were the workers faster or slower than our new revised standard? This is where our hard work pays off. Our correct standard was 91.42 hours, but they actually took 118.8 hours. Whoa, that's over 26 hours longer than it should have taken. We multiply those extra hours by the standard rate of 660, and it reveals a massive adverse variance of $17,595.60 rupees, all due to inefficiency. And now, the moment of truth. Let's put all of our clues together. This is the big reveal, where we reconcile the actual costs with our revised budget and see if our investigation really cracked the case. And there it is. We start with the actual cost that was spent, $79,704. We then account for the overspending by subtracting the $1,771 from the rate variance and the $17,595 from the efficiency variance. And what are we left with? 60,337.20 rupees. And get this, that number perfectly matches our revised standard hours of 91.42 multiplied by the standard rate of 660. The budget is reconciled, the mystery is solved, case closed. Before we wrap this all up, let's quickly review the key tools we use today. Think of this as your formula flash, a quick-fire recap of the essential equations you need in your toolkit. Don't forget these three. The learning curve formula lets you predict your team's potential. The rate variance tells you what you paid for the work, and the efficiency variance tells you how well that work was actually performed. If you can master these three, you'll be able to get to the bottom of pretty much any budget problem. So, we might have closed the case for Citi International, but the real question now is for you. Every budget is built on a set of assumptions, and as we've just seen, one wrong assumption about how your team learns can throw everything off. So, I'll leave you with this thought. What hidden learning curves are at play in your world? And are they secretly helping or hurting your bottom line? Thanks for joining me.